Welcome to episode 5 of the mysterious twins who alter the fate of the future. The story began by how these weird twins were conceived by their parents. We told the story of how the village of Mambele suffered in chronic poverty, and as a result, an intervention was required. And as a result of that intervention, nobody was supposed to give birth to a set of twins, and somehow, in a mysterious way, Nympha and Leo gave birth to two beautiful little girls. And as a result, they were chased out of the village into the forest. We also told the story of how these parents and their girls navigated the forest and raised their girls, eventually passing away after 12 years. We told the story of how the girls navigated their lives and tried to bury their parents, and finally, one of the girls leaving the forest and venturing into the world beyond. They say one of the hardest things to say is goodbye. If Nanre had known this, perhaps she would have reconsidered and dealt with the crazy urge that drove her to leave her sister and venture into the forest beyond. The problem was that the forest beyond was even a total stranger to the girls. Other than the 8 kilometers distance to the farm, going further hadn't for once been an option to them. It didn't take Nanre more than an hour to double the normal 8 kilometers into the deep. The journey seemed adventurous to Nanre at first. One part of her kept screaming to her that she should turn and return to her sister now that she could. Another part hungrily longed to see the world right ahead of her. If she could just have a taste of the wider world, she would return within a matter of days. How long would it take for her to find another village? A day? 2? Or maybe 3? Was she even in the right direction that would lead her to the nearest village? The thought of changing direction started popping from the deep of her mind to the surface. The weather was beginning to grow cold. The atmosphere was changing color. If nightfall met her in this forest, how safe would she be? Nightfall did meet her, of course. When the moon started glistening with radiant light, Nanre located a safe place and started preparing to camp. She withdrew the lamp she had carried, fueled it and illuminated the not-so-dark environment. Everything about the forest seemed strange. The sight of the trees, the constant humming of things she couldn't see, the occasional vibrance of the ground. Not that she wasn't accustomed to sight of trees. After all, the house was surrounded by trees. It was just that being here alone brought a kind of chill that she couldn't explain. When darkness eventually blanketed the atmosphere, Nanre started wondering if she hadn't made a big mistake by leaving home to this unknown ambience. Her wondering gave way to absurd thinking that something bad might befall her through the night. The absurd thinking gave way to terrible dreams when she eventually slept. She woke up thrice from disturbing nightmares before dawn finally came. When she arose that morning, she struggled to suppress the well of emotions that overshadowed her. She cried and cried without anyone nearby to console her. If she died in this forest, would mother and father not be angry? If she died in this forest, how would her sister find her body? If she died in this forest, what would become of her sister? Some of these thoughts she had considered before venturing out, but her desire to set out on the quest overshadowed them all. Now they were popping out of her mind like popcorns pop without control. She was losing herself. She had to put herself together. Even if she decided to go back now, it would take her no less than a full day to get back home. Spending just another night along the way was unavoidable. And it was also very unthinkable. The nearest village might just be a few paces ahead. Should she change direction left or right. She suddenly wished that Nana was here with her. The younger girl had a way of encouraging her. Few moments later, Nanre picked her things. If luck was with her, she would find a place of refuge soon enough. She had hoped she would find a place the second day, but now it was her third day and she was still in the jungle. It appeared there was, in fact, no other village except where she lived. The thought of going back was both encouraging and discouraging. The discouraging part came in phases. The first phase was that she wasn't sure she could still locate her way back home. And the second phase was that the thought of spending 2 more nights in this jungle was equivalent to suicide. So far, she hadn't come in contact with any animal whatsoever, and she knew it was because of the repellent that she sprayed before she ventured out. 1 more day and the repellent would become totally ineffective. And that means 2 more days in the jungle was an invitation to wild animals to feast on her body. According to her speculation before she embarked on the journey, she had hoped to spend at most 3 days in the jungle if she didn't relent. And she wasn't relenting. If she couldn't find a place of solace by the end of the day, she might start considering going back as her best option. Nightfall did meet Nanre in the forest, but sleep didn't come that night. One instinct told her that the repellent had already been rendered ineffective. The strange humming of the forest somehow got intensified. Her ordeal became a desperation. Instead of retiring for the night, she forged ahead in the dark jungle. Her desperation led to a craving urge to find some place as soon as possible. By morning, she might become a prey. Surprisingly, she didn't feel weary all through the night. Nanre toiled the forest all night till she saw the moon give way to the sun. How fast morning came was a wonder to her. She didn't stop, though now she felt somehow tired. She had to find a place. She definitely had to, or she would be dead by the end of the day. Her craving urge to get out of the forest gave way to the great amount of fear that now encapsulated her. Her eyes caught gaze of a tree with fruit pleasing to the eyes. The fruit beckoned on her to come pluck them. The humming of the forest had stopped. The breeze now blew gently. The young sun shone in a dazzling wonder. The morning was indeed refreshing. Nanre moved over to the tree and stopped to examine the fruit. Her food was almost finishing. She should use this fruit as breakfast and preserve her food. She didn't have to jump before having access to the fruit. She didn't even know how to describe the taste of the fruit. When she finished eating it, she sat under the tree to rest. Before she knew it, she was lost in sleep. It didn't take long before she awoke. Actually, something had awoken her. When she opened her eyes, she realized that she was still in the forest. The brightness of the day now beautified the forest. The fruit of the tree she slept under shone with a stunning beauty. A masculine face stared at her a few feet away. Nanre jumped up in absolute confusion. An older man stood just before her, staring as though he'd seen a ghost. For a split second, Nanre didn't know what to do. Should she run? Run to where? The man was a strange man, of course. That was the first time she would come in contact with another human. Everything about the man was strange. He held something long in his hand. His clothes was somehow similar to what Nanre knew as a cloth. From a deduction, this man was old enough to die. The beautiful morning was gradually becoming something else. It suddenly occurred to her that the fruit she had eaten was probably a trap from this man. When the man eventually spoke, Nanre couldn't make out what he meant. She stayed on, petrified. The man spoke again, but Nanre couldn't just understand him. He was speaking what didn't exist to the girl. When the man observed that the girl probably didn't understand his language, he communicated with her using his hands as a deaf man would. This, of course, Nanre understood. She tried to express herself to him that she was a stranger who had lost track of the right direction. But it appeared that the man didn't understand her. The man appeared to be kind, though Nanre didn't want to believe that he was kind. When she started to cry, the man gently set his things down, sat, and watched her as she cried. They couldn't understand each other, but the man now understood that she had been lost in the forest. Nanre sat with him and they tried to communicate in neutral language, which of course was ineffective. Some minutes later, Nanre realized that she was going with the man. Finally, she had found another village, or more appropriately, another human being. She just hadn't thought there would be a communication problem between him and other humans. If she went with the man, she would learn his language, and then she would tell him about her sister. They would go and get her, and together they would live happily with this man and his people. Meanwhile, back at home, it had never occurred to Nana that she would one day remain alone in the environment she knew to be her only description of a home. Worse still, it had never occurred to her that Nanre, the only other living being she knew, would leave her to go in search of the murderers of their parents. She had tried everything she could to convince her sister that the step she was thinking of taking was a very wrong step. But the girl had simply made up her mind. Nana didn't know what had gotten into her sister. Her sudden obsession with the wider world was just beyond the ordinary. Nana slept well that first night. She had a pleasant dream of herself and her sister living together, forever young and bringing to life the hope of their parents. When she arose the following morning, she prepared and enjoyed a delicious breakfast, after which she slept again. She woke up at past noon and sat quietly beside the grave of their parents. A part of her desperately longed for her sister. Another part desperately longed for their parents. She silently hoped that somehow Nanre would return and apologize for leaving in the first place. When evening came, Nana returned inside the house, prepared and ate a nutritious dinner, and quietly slept off. Her routine was the same for the next few days. A week later, she started going to the farm in the morning, realizing that it would be helpful to her. Days passed, weeks passed, months passed. Nanre didn't return. At some point, Nana began to feel very disturbed about her sister. Why hadn't she returned? Why hadn't she reconsidered her ways? Had something bad happened to her? Had those evil people done something bad to her? She had promised to return in a few days, but now the few days had stretched into several long days and she hadn't returned. What was happening? For the first time, she started to strongly consider leaving the forest in search of her sister. Diverse kind of thoughts collided in her head for several days. One day, she decided that it was time to take action. She would go and search for her sister, and however it went, she would find her at all costs. But first things first, she had to settle her conscience regarding their parents. And so she started by digging another grave just beside their parents' grave. Once she succeeded in separating their parents, as her conscience had repeatedly suggested to her, she would venture into the wider world and find her beloved sister. The digging process lasted only a few days. She dug up the existing grave and found two bones staring at her with round, dark eyes. Nothing that she knew told her that her parents would disintegrate to something like this. At first, she was utterly confused, even shocked to see what remained of father and mother. The shock didn't last. She carried out the assignment as she had intended and succeeded. Mother's bone was moved to the new grave. It was mission accomplished. The process of relocating the bones took her 3.5 days. All through the process, the thought of going back didn't even flicker through her mind. When she finished, she compensated herself with a full day of sleep. The next mission was to start preparing to go rescue her sister. But how to begin about that seemed to be a big challenge on its own. One beautiful morning, the thought of entering father's inner room suddenly dropped in Nana's mind. Though she knew precisely what she would find in the room, yet something kept bothering her that if she must rescue her sister, then she had to visit the room. When she eventually entered the room, she found precisely what she knew she would find. The overall gently hung on the wall, nothing else. She moved towards the overall, studied it for a long moment, and then, after discovering nothing new, decided to move out. As she was about to close the door, she realized what she and her sister didn't realize the first time they entered the room. The floor of the room was covered with a fine, opaque object in such a way that, without carefully observing it, one would have missed it completely. She left the door ajar and walked briskly inside. Evidently, the floor was covered. When she started tracing, it didn't take her long before confirming that she was indeed right. Father had deliberately done this. Why he had done it, Nana couldn't quite understand. She wished that her sister was around to witness her discovery today. Another thought quickly told her that the discovery had been made simply because she wanted to go rescue her sister. She started to uncover the ground. By the time she was done, what she found beneath the carpet stunned her. There was an opening in the ground. She couldn't help but think continuously of what could possibly be in the hole. Was it that father actually did cleansing here? Evening was still on the way when Nana fully made up her mind to enter the hole. She started walking to remove the carefully placed cover. When she did, she discovered that the house had been deliberately positioned where it was. Beneath it, the ground went down in depth. It was as if after digging this hole, the house was moved over it. A cover was carefully cut out to allow entrance. Or someone, most likely father, had creatively cut the wood of the house and dug the hole beneath the ground. She gently descended, and when she got to the bottom, she realized that she would need light. Ascending to the ground level wasn't something difficult, because it was obvious that someone entered the hole regularly. Measures of ascending had adequately been provided. Nana didn't return to the hole that night, but it was the first thing she did the following morning. The place was dark despite the fact that it was morning. Lighting a lamp, she walked around the darkened room and noticed nothing that interested her. The place was empty. On the walls, there were drawings she hadn't seen before. Walking closer to the wall, the drawings now stood clearly before her. A few minutes later, she understood that the drawings had perhaps been carved on the wall by father using the pebbles they'd found upstairs. Why? That was the ultimate question. The drawing appeared to be of people, several people, or the same set of people in different stages of life. Immediately Nana touched the drawings and felt the lines of the wall with her fingers. The meaning of the drawings started unraveling before her. It was as if a life story was happening right before her. The drawings on the wall started playing to Nana like a drama. What she discovered through these means opened a new door to her. The next 5 years of her life was spent preparing to go into the wider world, albeit not to rescue her sister, but to murder her. What could have changed? Why would Nana suddenly change from rescuing her sister to murdering her? What happened to her the moment she touched those drawings on the wall? The story continues in the next episode. I hope that you have enjoyed the story of the mysterious twins so far. Please check out for the next episode in the next video. And this is where we beg you to kindly subscribe to the channel, like the video, and yes, turn up the notification bell. These things have a way of encouraging small channels like this, and of course, it will help more people to learn more about African folktales. Thank you for following the story so far. I hope that we have been able to add value to you through this story. Till I see you in the next video. Thank you and gracious.